computer or what, or my internet. But welcome to Chinwag Nation, episode number 2. Steven and I are so excited to spend time with you this morning. Some basic housekeeping, like this is our opinion. This is really kind of about our thoughts and our experiences with leadership. We have over 40 years combined between the two of us in various roles and experiences, and we're just excited to spend time with you. And today, we're talking about The Power of Mattering, a book that was recently released by Zach Mercurio. And we're excited to dig into it. It's such an important subject for folks, and Stephen, as long as I've known you, you've been somebody who cares about showing people that they matter. I remember when we worked together back in the day, you used to bring people pies. And now that I think about it, I don't remember the last time you brought me a pie. So, like, do I matter anymore, to you?
Ryan, I just want to throw it out there. Like, whose house are you staying at right now?
That's true. I do matter. I mean something to you. No, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah. No, it's kind of interesting, just a personal story of there's a long period of time where I tried to figure out, like, what defines success for me in a role. I remember my first job coming out of college. I was super excited, had this incredible opportunity to learn. I had a great boss. And, they believed in me, and I remember I go into the office for the first day, super excited, and then I had this sort of like existential moment where I'm looking around and I just see the kind of the rat race, right? Just like walls and walls of cubicles, and looking out the window and seeing the sunlight and realizing, like, this is going to be the rest of my life, just gray cubicles. And from there, like, I had this like personal journey of, if I'm going to be spending 40 to 60 hours or more a week doing something, that work in and of itself needs to matter. And it wasn't until I started managing teams that I really kind of found that spark. What did it for me was people, advocating for people, empowering people, helping people do their best work, showing up for them in ways that maybe traditional leaders haven't done. And that's the kind of stuff that gets me excited. And it wasn't until, again, that I had that first leadership opportunity where, that just kind of all clicked.
Yeah, man, that makes sense. I know that this book covers kind of like 3 key areas, right? It's noticing, right? So the practice of seeing and hearing others, affirming, the practice of showing people that their unique gifts make a unique difference, and needing, the practice of showing people how they're relied on and indispensable. And like,
Yeah.
when I think about you and your leadership style and how you show up, like those 3 things pop up. And when I think about this idea of building a leadership community, right? That's a thing. Not community leadership, right? Not like civic, or your neighborhood association, right? But true kind of leadership from a community standpoint, building that community. Those 3 things feel like those kind of come to mind, right? As I think about like what it takes to actually build a solid leadership community. And if they're not in place, like what happens? What happens to the social fabric between leaders, like in the cultural space? And I have you seen like these things play out? And like when you think about noticing, right, the practice of seeing and hearing others, like what comes to mind for you from a positive standpoint and a negative standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about this is actually like break away from the traditional confines, I think, of what it is that we're talking about. And that's, we're talking about the workplace a lot of the times, like leadership in the workplace.
Yeah.
And you're going into this third place leadership concept of doing the hard stuff together. There's an aspect of leadership that we often don't talk about, and that's just the humanity that you bring to a particular role, right? And so, like, stripping away all the professional variables that may be there, and just thinking about personally, how does mattering impact you as an individual, and then, if that becomes a part of your regular mo, how you're treating other individuals, um, it just goes a long way, because with people, right? Like, you're going to have people that show up to collect a paycheck. You're going to have people
Yeah.
that are motivated to grow. You're going to have people that have their own motivations for being at work. Maybe they're trying to take care of a loved one. Maybe they're, just trying to afford rent.
But what I
And
what I what I think though, just a quick pause. I don't when I think about those different roles that you just described, I feel like these aspects of mattering like kind of cut through. I think people who show up for a paycheck still want to
oh,
matter,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm getting to, is that, like, there's there's reasons people show up to work, but there's still like a whole person behind that role, right? And even though they may have a singular reason for showing up to work, or a simple reason for showing up to work, like, everybody wants to matter. Like, even anthropologically, like, there was a
Well,
biological,
what does that word even mean? Like
um,
anthropologically.
like the study of, I'm just going to say this for the a subset of anthropology, just the study of humans, right?
Okay.
The
Thanks.
like,
Evolution over time, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
think about like how humans survived,
Yeah.
right? You needed shelter, you needed food, you
Basic.
needed water, but in anthropology, there was also this concept of you needed community, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and
A community is a key part of evolution, right? From a
right,
human evolution standpoint. Yeah.
and that's how, like, people are biologically wired, right?
Hmm.
Like a survival mechanism, having that role, feeling a part of that community, and we I did some research, going into, this call and the power of mattering, and trying to look up, some interesting statistics, validated statistics of how people feel about mattering in the workplace. And um, Harvard Business Review is saying that 30% of employees feel invisible at work, 65% feel underappreciated,
Wait, hold
and
on a
eight
second. Like invisible?
invisible. Like, they're
I think
there,
that's like
but
when I think about this book, like that's like the antithesis of what this book is trying to
right,
say, right? Like,
yeah,
how can you make people feel uninvisible?
right,
Yeah.
and 82% feel lonely,
Yeah.
right? And so, just sort of setting that stage, that foundation, right, of mattering. Like, imagine if somebody like your boss did the things that you were talking about, the noticing, the affirming, the needing
Hmm.
of one particular individual. Just imagine the amount of potential that you're unlocking in that person. And that goes beyond just the role themselves. Like, think about their own personal power and how they're going to show up, um, outside of work. I'm pretty sure that we've had work follow us home before, you know?
Yeah, without a doubt. And and people bring their past experiences with them,
Yeah.
right? I remember there was a period where I was leading a pretty large team, and a person I was, they were one of my employees, had just some really rough experiences in the past. And it wasn't the noticing and affirming and needing wasn't just a matter of no pun intended, right? But wasn't just a matter of seeing their work, right, and their work product, or like their ability to kind of navigate successfully within the organization. It was also just seeing like and acknowledging their past,
Yeah.
as well. Um and 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 from a it's not a I don't view these things as like a light switch thing, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to notice, I'm going to affirm, I'm going to show somebody that I need them, and all of a sudden, like, it's just going to be this amazing thing overnight, right? It took this
Yeah.
person over a year, right? And they needed to be seen in their way, right? Not in the way that I thought that they needed to be seen or
Yeah.
valued. And I think there's a important consideration there, right? I've caught myself in this trap and I've seen it happen before. It's like, oh, to your point about like paycheck or growth or what, oh, this person wants, right? This person wants to grow in the organization, but maybe they don't.
Yeah.
Right. And so seeing that right aspect is important. And so I think there's a there's a discovery aspect to this, right? And you have to kind of get to know the person to know how to really deliver these things.
Absolutely. And, to your point of this isn't an overnight thing, right? Like, I don't want to get into the deep psychology of mattering, right? But chances are, a lot of people have their own childhood traumas that they're not even aware of when they're coming into work, right?
Yeah,
And
possibly.
it takes consistency of these types of people behavior and showing up for your people and making hard decisions that may even impact your own political capital or reputation to represent your people that builds trust over time.
Yeah, I actually wrote something down very similar as I was preparing for right this conversation this morning is, and it's something I say regularly, and that good leadership is uh, is represented in daily kind of leaps of faith,
Yeah.
right? Because these actions of, and just if you're just joining us, right, we're talking about the three kind of key aspects of the Power of Mattering book by Zach Mercurio, right? The practice of noticing, the practice of seeing others. I'm sorry, seeing and hearing others, affirming, the practice of showing people how their unique gifts make a unique difference, right? To that point of individualism that you're kind of speaking to, and needing, the practice of showing people how they're relied on and indispensable. And I think that's really kind of key, right? Like not everybody has to be indispensable in the same way.
Yeah.
And just to kind of to tie it back, so daily leaps of faith, and those daily leaps of faith are cumulative, right? So, and everybody's going to have their, for lack of a better word, their own flowering,
Mm-hmm.
time. They're going to bloom in the way and the timing that works best for them. And so it might take 100 little acts for one person. It might just take one
Yeah.
for another, right? They've been so starved of this feeling of feeling valued and worthy that like just one simple act can just like skyrocket, right, their self-worth and their personal value.
And I think something that's really important to highlight about this is we're talking about unique individuals, right? And I think there's so many managers out there who are not leaders. And leadership takes
Like
like
what does that mean?
like you can be in a manager position and have that positional power, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a following of respect and trust, right? Um, Leadership is a different level of effort, and it doesn't matter, like, at least to me, if I'm overseeing three people, one person, or a team of 75 or hundreds, right? Like, you need to invest the time in getting to know the individuals that are working for you. And I say individuals specifically because not a single person is going to be the same as their peer,
Yeah.
right? And there's going to be different motivations, different levels of how people like to be recognized.
Yeah.
Um, and if you don't spend the time to understand that, you can't just take a blanket approach to your whole entire department and just assume that that's going to work for everybody, right?
Yeah, it makes me think about there was a time in my career where I was kind of an internal consultant for an organization, right? I did organizational development, strategic planning, lean, basically whatever, right, the leaders needed that I was, assigned to. And there was a new kind of division director starting in their role. And they said, "Hey, Brian, like what are your recommendations for how I should really kind of like settle in. I said, I've heard, and this may not work for everybody, that you want to spend the first 3 right to 6 months just listening.
Yeah.
Don't take any significant action. Don't change a whole lot. Right? Just listen. And I think sometimes the act of not changing can make people feel noticed and affirmed and needed. Right? That
Yeah.
whatever they've been doing it's good enough, right, to um, be seen as valuable. And I'm listened to before my big boss changes anything. And the other thing I had recommended to this leader was, have a regular one-to-one with your people. And because I would imagine like there's people who are listening right now or who will listen once this recording is done, who will say like, hey, I've got like 50 to 100 people that I am responsible for in my vertical or my org chart. I can't get to know everybody. I would imagine like there's people who will listen to this and say like, hey, those are really great ideas, you guys, but I'm too busy. I've got too much to cover. And this leader made it work, right?
Yeah.
I think they had over 100 people in their division. And what this person did um, is they took the advice of the first 3 to 6 months and they had a one-to-one with every person, right? They made
Yeah.
time to meet with every person. And then every year after that, they met with that we met with everybody at least once throughout the year.
Yeah.
And so I think you can still get to know people and be approachable and lead in this noticing, affirming, and needing way, even if it's just one time a year.
Yeah. I remember because I do the same thing. In fact, I've told my my leadership when I start in a new leadership role, like, hey, I'm gonna be investing these first couple of weeks and just meeting with my people. And
Mhm.
I remember I would set up these one-to-ones, 15 to 30 minutes with everybody, right? And I had individual
Probably scared them.
well, that's exactly it. Like I had individuals come into my office in tears because they
Yeah,
thought they were in trouble.
trouble. Isn't that
And they
crazy?
were like, I've been working here for over 10
Yeah,
years and I've never met with the director one on one.
I think
And you
that's
have to understand, like, people may say I don't have the time to do all this, right? And maybe you don't because that's your priorities. But
yeah.
each one of these individuals is going to be contributing well over 2,000 hours a year
Mhm.
into your system of, or I should say, like, portfolio of work, right? And if you give that individual 15 to 30 minutes, and yeah, that adds up over time, but the return on investment for those over 2,000 hours that they're going to be producing for that year is, going to be exponentially higher. It's
Yeah,
likely, they're going to feel empowered. They're going to feel listened to. And frankly, the higher up you are, the less operational you often are, the more strategic space you're supposed to be. And
mhm.
those individuals who are doing the work are going to provide significant value in just the inputs that they provide towards that strategy development. And so if you're developing a place where people feel comfortable communicating with you and where people trust you, you're going to be able to ultimately make better decisions.
Yeah, I something you said. Well, everything you said resonated with me, but something you said really um, prompted a couple of thoughts, right? And that's the impact of positional power, right, on communication. I'm sure you've seen this. I'm sure you've experienced it, where like you say, "Oh, I have this idea," and all of a sudden it becomes an initiative,
Yeah.
right, in the workplace. And similarly, um, if if an organizational culture, right, has a pattern of when you get attention, you get in trouble,
Yeah.
right? And you're reading this book, and this is not to discount this work at all. This is important work, and I value and believe in what Zach's writing in his book. Um, but if you're entering a culture where if people get attention, they get in trouble, then you really have to think about how you want to set the stage for noticing, affirming, and telling people that they're needed, right? And I would assume if you do all three, right, it actually can help, right, navigate maybe some of those organizational challenges. And you might be in conflict, right,
Yeah.
with the culture if you show up this way. And so like it's just, I think it's really important to kind of reemphasize what you shared earlier, and that's like learn the people, learn the organization, because ultimately if you don't, you could be breaking trust without even realizing it.
Yeah. And I don't know why this thought keeps coming to my mind as we talk about this, but I have a feeling based off of my experience that some people don't know how to matter, which
Okay, so
is really
tell me more.
really sad in and of itself. But like
Yeah,
there's um like you were mentioning, right? Like some people don't want the spotlight on them, and
yeah,
maybe there's reasons for
yeah.
that. And some people may not necessarily know how to feel empowered or what to do with that because they've just never experienced it before. And so just think about the power in that type of dynamic, right? As somebody who is going to be seen as, we were talking about power, right? Like in their positional power of a
Mm-hmm.
place of authority,
Yeah,
believing in somebody, like you might you might even have to coach people on like what do you do with that motivation? What do you do with those good feels? What do you know, what does it mean?
mm-hmm.
When I hear that 30% of people feel invisible and 85% of people feel lonely, right? That's sad, man. That's sad.
That's super sad. I know you wrote down some other kind of key things, as you were reading
Mm-hmm.
kind of the HBR article, and I think it's important to kind of maybe pull some of those out as we close out. But what you kind of touched on, I think, and which is I think an important idea, is this idea of the balance between a transactional leadership culture, right, versus a relational
Yeah.
leadership culture. And if you're leaning too far in one direction, and it's just all transactional, um, it's not a lot of space created for noticing and affirming and showing people that they're
Yeah.
needed, right? And they may not ever even get to a point where they might not know how to matter because the culture doesn't support gaining skills and knowing how to matter, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in a relational culture, this might be on overkill, and this the they these things become maybe kind of perceived as disingenuous or overdone, right, or not real. And there's potential for under management too, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so like there's a balance, I think, between transactional and relational that can help people not only show others that they matter, but also, right, gain the skills to know how to matter.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a pendulum for sure. Um, you have to be careful, like you were mentioning, on how far you swing one way or the other. Um, you know, when I think of this stuff, I know that there's a lot of people that, because you know we're here to generate some type of impact in our work, right? Like we show up to work for either a business that's trying to create profit or a business that's trying to create impact, right?
Mhm.
And I think for those that are wired in that very black and white way, in our audience, where they have to think return on investment or
Mhm.
cost, right? That there is a return on investment for having individuals, and I say that instead of teams, feel
Okay.
like they matter, and there's also a cost of disengagement.
What do you mean by that? Like a cost of disengagement?
That if you're, I don't, I
Are
feel
you are
I
you
feel bad.
affirming the need to have these things in place, basically,
Yeah,
like
yeah. Well, and I
affirming?
feel bad. I feel bad doing this or like making this reference, right? But like, have you ever done a big project with the wrong tool, or
Sure.
like say a manual tool versus like
Yeah. I
a gas powered tool,
I
right?
I can I can even like get down to a smaller level, right? I've prepared a 5-day workshop, and I walk in there, and within like 30 minutes I'm like, "Oh, this plan is it's not going to work."
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you kind of wing it, for you pull out money tools, right, in the tool set,
yeah.
right, to get it done. Yeah.
But if you take somebody from being, you know, like a manual handheld tool, and now
Mm.
all of a sudden you give them this engine of mattering, right? And
Yeah.
you're every time you compliment them
Mm.
or make them feel seen as an individual and you're putting fuel in that engine,
Yeah.
like imagine how long it would take you to do that that particular chore or that particular task with that hand tool versus,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, that's a kind of, I think that's a great way to close us out here. And that's something that that Zach talks about often when he's writing or posting or on video or at a conference or speaking, you know, and it's this idea that if we feel valued, we add value, right? If we feel like we matter, we'll act like we matter. And just something for everybody to take away. And this is a when we were meeting and listening to Zach a few weeks ago, he posed a great question, and that's something it's something that you all can apply when you're meeting with your staff, just to get the ball rolling, or even at home. I've asked my family. I need to follow up with them. My wife is my loyal listener here. She's here with us live, so thank you, Joe. And that is, when did I feel like I made you matter the most? What did I do? What did I say? And I think that's really important for a couple of reasons. One, like you know what to do, keep doing, right? And you also know what comes naturally to you as a leader. And so if you take anything away from this morning, just ask those around you, like, when have I made you feel like you matter the most? What did I do? What did I say? How did I act? And see what people say. And I think there's a lot to be learned, right, in that space.
That makes me think, Brian, we should probably talk about giving and receiving feedback
Yeah.
on here as a topic, because
Hmm.
anytime you solicit for feedback, it's also very important as a leader to be able to receive that feedback, especially if it's not what you want to hear. Right.
That's a great subject. I think that's what we'll be talking about next week. So join us next week. Giving and receiving feedback. Feedback is a gift. Thank you for that feedback, Stephen, to close us out. And have a phenomenal close to your week.